representing North Orange County and Los Angeles, and we want to thank you for joining us today. We are here to highlight legislative efforts to reform incarceration for women. Our justice system has long overlooked the unique needs of incarcerated women, and it's time for change. Women in prison are overwhelmingly survivors of trauma, disproportionately mothers, and often incarcerated for nonviolent offenses. When we incarcerate women without addressing the underlying causes, we are not just punishing them, we are punishing their children and destabilizing their families. We must ensure that our justice system is not just about punishment, but about rehabilitation, dignity, and second chances. I want to thank my colleague, Assemblymember Mia Bonta, and all of this beautiful group standing with me, which are not only survivors, advocates, but women who firmly believe that we need change. Member Mia Bonta has been a leader in this space well before I began focusing in this area. I want to acknowledge the work that she's been doing as the past budget chair in this area and fighting for reforms. We also have with us Ann Irwin from Smart Justice, California, Amika Moda from Sister Warriors, and Sol Mercado from Planting Justice. Sol, thank you, ladies, for joining us. Their work has been instrumental in pushing for policies that support rehabilitation, reduce recidivism, and center justice-impacted women in policy discussions. I just want to go off script here, as my team knows I have, but this has been an education experience that the California Women's Caucus took a delegation this fall to Ireland and to Scotland to see women's prisons. There were many women that traveled, and we really wanted to see how are other prisons operating. In addition, many of us here have also traveled to Norway with Smart Justice, which became a transformative experience for me personally to see that we can do incarceration not only better, but that can change lives when individuals leave. With that, I'm going to introduce, as I said, my colleague on our working group. In this working group, focusing on women incarceration, I'm really proud to say something that came out of that trip where we said we want to continue to work in this area and we want to make sure that others know about that. And the partner on this working group, co-leader, is Assemblymember Mia Bonta. And as I mentioned, she has been steadfast for criminal justice reform, ensuring that we prioritize rehabilitation over incarceration. And I'm going to let her talk about some of her efforts. Welcome, Assemblymember Mia Bonta.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Quirk-Silva. I'm Assemblymember Mia Bonta, and I represent the beautiful people of Oakland, Alameda, and Emeryville. And today, I represent the strong women who are locked in our carceral system when they shouldn't be. I currently serve as chair of Assembly Health, and as Assemblymember Quirk-Silva shared, I had the opportunity to serve as a public safety sub-chair for the Assembly on the budget side, which was really an illuminating experience, as was an opportunity to work with incredible advocates like the ones that are standing behind us and who you will hear from today, and smart leaders in our community and advocates in our community like Smart Justice that really focuses on an opportunity for legislators to get proximate, to understand what is happening in our carceral system, and to be able to hear the stories of people who are living in residence of our facilities in the California Department of Corrections. And let me tell you, the stories of women are the most powerful that you will hear. I'm very thankful to our co-chair and leader of the working group, Assemblymember Quirk-Silva, who took it upon herself in one of her, towards the end of her time as a legislator, to really take on the efforts of making sure that we had an opportunity to lift up the voices of women, especially within our carceral system. And I'm very thankful for her leadership. I want to stand and talk to you a little bit about Norway. So it was my pleasure to be able to travel to Norway when we went on an amend trip with Smart Justice. In the 1990s, Norway faced a recidivism crisis similar to ours today, with nearly 70% of released prisoners reoffending within 2 years. Their solution, an ideology that focused on making sure that people who were incarcerated would ultimately be our good neighbors. It's a system developed around small, community-based correctional facilities focused on rehabilitation and reintegration. It paid off. In Norway, and now has one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world, with just 20% of people within 2 years recidivating. These approaches that we've heard about in Norway and Scotland and Ireland and other places, sadly, we had to go far away from the state of California for a while. But it also inspired what we are now calling the California model. And in 2023, as a part of that ideology, I introduced legislation that really thought to make sure to put the R of rehabilitation back into CDCR. Despite spending over $130,000 on each CDCR residence, a mere less than 1% of those funds are spent on rehabilitation programs that are community-based. And that is not the California model, it is not any model, and it is not true justice. So today we have a dream to make sure that we're doing something different. I want to recognize in particular Sol Mercado, who you will hear from shortly. She's a reentry coordinator from Planting Justice, an organization I'm proud to have in my district right here in Oakland. You will hear from Sol about the impact when you have strong reentry and rehabilitation programs, what it can do for people who are our residents in our correctional facilities. I wanted to also just recognize the working group and the individual efforts and championing that our working group members have done in the Legislative Women's Caucus to really uplift not only legislative priorities but also budget priorities, so that we are clear that we need to make sure that we're spending more than just 1% or 5% in total on our rehabilitation programs, because it actually leads to decreased recidivism rates. A report by the CDCR recently released says essentially that even with the limited resources that we've applied to rehabilitation reentry efforts, we've seen a decrease in recidivism markedly over the course of 3 years in a study that was recently published. And imagine what we could do if we applied more resources to the basic concept of supporting women, of supporting rehabilitation and reentry. Assemblymember Quirk-Silva outlined, and the members of the Incarcerated Women's Working Group have outlined several budget requests for our 2025-26 Budget Act year, and it's essentially over $49 million of rehabilitation, educational, and housing program offerings that would essentially flip the script. Over $6 million for menopause programs and sexual abuse and harassment oversight, and millions in expanding funding to train formerly incarcerated young adults to mentor justice-involved youth. You will hear from Assemblymember El-Hawari, who will speak to one particular program that relates to ensuring that we are supporting our fire camps and our women's participation in our fire camps, because that is a true path to public service as well as recidivism. And you will hear our efforts to support Right Grant 3.0 in the coming years to be able to ensure that we are truly investing our funding and our resources in ensuring that we are reducing recidivism in our system. To my sisters who are here with us today standing, thank you. We are getting things done like we always do, no matter what it takes. It doesn't take an extreme budget year. It doesn't take an opportunity to focus on justice. It doesn't take an opportunity to recognize that women are always at the center of the work that we all do, to understand that feminism extends past our prison doors. It's my pleasure now to introduce my friend and longtime advocate, Ann Irwin, for her Executive Director of Smart Justice California.
Good morning. I'm Ann Irwin, Executive Director of Smart Justice California. I first want to take a moment to thank Assembly Members Quirk-Silva, Mia Bonta, all of the other members who are standing with us today, and the entire Women's Caucus for their really historic leadership on this important and often unexamined issue. Mass incarceration in California fails people and communities in a multitude of ways. But perhaps the most alarming facet of our incarceration system is the incarceration and often double punishment of women. Women in our state's jails and prisons face unique and devastating hardships. Abuse and violence, medical neglect, unsanitary conditions, and forced estrangement from their children. Half of incarcerated women in California have encountered sexual or gender-based violence during their incarceration. Half of incarcerated women are facing sexual violence during their incarceration. This is a crisis. 83% of incarcerated women are experiencing medical neglect or medical abuse. And over 50% of transgender people living inside California's prisons report having been sexually assaulted. This tremendous abuse inside prison is not new for incarcerated women. Most women incarcerated in California were the victims of violence during the years leading up to their incarceration. They are arriving in California's prisons having been the victims of trauma and abuse. According to a recent study by Stanford University, nearly 3 out of 4 women in California prisons experienced intimate partner violence, domestic violence, the year before their arrest. That's a rate 10 times higher than the national average. Large numbers of women are being held in prison in California because they acted defensively against their abuser. Put simply, the vast majority of women living in California's prisons were subject to violence and abuse before their incarceration, and now we've locked them inside a system that continues to abuse and neglect them. Criminalizing victims isn't just morally wrong. It is a gross misuse of taxpayer dollars that could be far better spent on victim support and services. We spend $133,000 a year to incarcerate a woman in California, yet we have barely 100 domestic violence shelters up and down the state. California domestic violence shelters actually are in crisis this year because of the federal government. We may have to turn away thousands and thousands more women who are seeking shelter. This failure is just going to perpetuate cycles of violence and lead to more women landing in prison after their abuse. For all of these and many, many more reasons, I am so proud to stand here today alongside really courageous legislative champions who have done the hard work, the long hours of visiting California's prisons, of traveling internationally to learn about international best practices for incarcerating women, and most importantly, the time that each and every one of them have spent with incarcerated women, hearing directly from them about their lives, their journeys, and their struggles. All of that hard work animates this legislative package. It is a historic step toward ensuring women's health and safety, and most importantly, well-being in California. Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce my close colleague in this work, Amika Mota.
Good morning. My name is Amika Mota. I'm the Executive Director of Sister Warriors. I'd like to express my gratitude to Assemblymember Quirk-Silva and Assemblymember Bonta and all of the members that are here today for their ongoing commitment to improving the lives of people incarcerated in the California women's prisons. Despite the long history of incarcerated women and trans people organizing for their rights, the unique challenges that we face are often overlooked when discussing mass incarceration. Today, I'd like to lift up my currently incarcerated siblings who have been leading this work and can't be here today to speak for themselves. I'd also like to thank the organizations like the California Coalition for Women Prisoners and Survived and Punished, who have been in solidarity with people inside every step of the way. Since the founding of Sister Warriors, a primary focus of our work has been in responding to the ongoing staff sexual assault crisis in our women's prisons. Last month marked the 10-year anniversary of my release from the Central California Women's Facility after 7 years of imprisonment. It is so painful to know that the same incidents of sexual violence that I experienced then are still taking place today. Let me be clear, sexual violence perpetrated by corrections staff is an ongoing and urgent crisis. There are multiple lawsuits currently pending that not only address the brutal assaults by officers in California women's prisons, but also the serial abuse of incarcerated people by a staff gynecologist at the California Institution for Women. Sadly, California is not alone. Every prison in every state is ripe for this type of violence. I'm encouraged by the work that we are doing as Sister Warriors, alongside our allies such as CCWP, Survived and Punished, Just Detention International, Justice First, Valor, and Prevail. Together, we have the privilege of collaborating with incarcerated people to reduce sexual violence in California women's prisons. Through our ambassador program, we are responding to and preventing sexual assault in carceral settings in California. We hope to sustain this program with ongoing funding in this year's budget. Since the Sexual Assault Working Group's report was published just over a year ago, we have received incredible support from the Legislative Women's Caucus in implementing the policy recommendations from that report. We thank the caucus for their partnership in this endeavor and hope that we can continue our collaboration to secure the much-needed funding to ensure that the Office of Inspector General can intervene and provide greater oversight and accountability into investigations of sexual misconduct by CDCR staff. The Women's Caucus partnership has been invaluable as we work to protect and advance the rights, dignity, and freedom of incarcerated women and trans people. We want to thank Senator Menjivar, who introduced one of the bills in today's package, SB 337, which will protect survivors from abuse from corrections staff, support survivors' healing, and prevent future abuse. Specifically, it will make it easier for community-based organizations to provide survivors with access to support and independent mental health services. We also want to thank Assemblymember Awiar Curry, the author of AB 464, which we are proudly co-sponsoring along with CCWP and Valor, to protect the survivors who are bold enough to report their abuse from retaliation and provide survivors with access to community-based and family support systems. And finally, AB 938 by Assemblymember Bonta would provide relief to survivors who are incarcerated as a result of their victimization. Survivors of gender-based violence are currently being doubly punished and funneled into prisons because their courts fail to consider the traumatic situations that they were subjected to during their abuse. We don't believe that this violence can end until the incarceration of women and trans people ends. That is our ultimate goal, to bring all of our siblings home. But until then, please join me and us in supporting these vital legislative and budget efforts to advance their rights, dignity, and humanity. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce my colleague and friend, Sol Mercado.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sol Mercado, and I'm a formerly incarcerated woman who spent 16 years in prison. I was sent to prison right after my 19th birthday, spending my young adult life behind those walls. But I fought for my freedom and pushed myself to become the woman that I am today. When I came home in December 2020, after being found suitable for parole under SB 261, I had a job waiting for me at Planting Justice, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering people impacted by mass incarceration. I started as a nursery technician and worked my way up to reentry coordinator. Today, I'm here to speak on behalf of the thousands of women who are incarcerated in California who need support. I was told countless times that I was never going to go home. I was reminded of my crime on a daily basis, but that did not stop me from pushing myself to change my life. I work really hard to prove that those who make bad decisions can change, lead, and uplift others. Like the woman before me who paved the way, I now work hard to ensure that those coming home have the support they need to succeed. At 19, I made a horrible decision that completely altered the lives of everyone around me, including my own. I faced the death penalty without understanding what trauma was and how it impacted my life and my decisions. If I had known sooner that it was okay to ask for help, maybe I wouldn't have made the decisions that led me to a 31-year sentence. In prison, I met women with similar experiences. Some have suffered domestic abuse and trauma, but never had the chance to address it or get out of the abusive relationship they were in. Many of these women were serving life and others life without parole sentences. These women were the ones that mentored me, showed me that my voice mattered, and taught me to make better decisions. Yet they remain behind bars. Their sentences considered not worthy of review. How fair is that? Women in prison have spoken up about injustices, sexual abuse, lack of medical care, staff assaults, and deaths. Yet these issues continue. Those meant to protect them from often silence them instead. Where is the healing? Where are the reforms? What resources exist to help this woman rebuild their lives? Too often they're left alone, isolated, and labeled as beyond redemption. While the justice system has changed in recent years, it's not enough. Women are often forgotten, denied resentencing, left without proper representation, and given little access to reentry programs or transitional housings. Many serve their time only to be taken away from their children and or be deported, even after proving their rehabilitation. Others who have dedicated their lives to mentorship and advocacy remain locked away, their potential wasted. As a reentry coordinator and through my own reentry process, I have seen firsthand how limited support there is for women coming home. Most of the transitional housing is for men, forcing women into unfamiliar counties, homelessness, or survival-driven recidivism. This is why funding for reentry programs is critical. Women need housing, jobs, and comprehensive support to succeed and reduce recidivism. Nonprofits like Planting Justice play a vital role in this work, offering job training, professional development, and living wage jobs in an environment that understands the challenges formerly incarcerated people face. At Planting Justice, we're no longer a number. We're leaders, decision makers, and agents of change. I am proof that with the right support, people don't return to prison. Imagine if we provided wraparound services before women were released. If we don't make resources more accessible, we will continue to see the cycle of incarceration repeat. It shouldn't matter whether someone is on parole, probation, or off paperwork. Everyone deserves a fair chance at rebuilding their lives. Our crime does not define us. Everyone makes bad decisions, but we are more than capable of rehabilitating and making different decisions. If we want to end recidivism, we must provide safe spaces for women to heal and the resources they need in order to thrive. Many of us have served our time and have demonstrated that we deserve a second chance. Thank you for your time.
I want to thank our advocates and our speakers for those important stories. We need to hear these stories. Now we are going to be inviting up our presentations from my colleagues on the bills that they're going to be bringing forward. We're going to start with, I think we'll start with Assemblymember Menjivar, and then we'll have Assemblymember Bonta and myself go at the end.
Hi, good morning. Senator Caroline Menjivar here. I never thought I was going to work in this space. It's not something that I ran on. In fact, very similar to my colleague, Assemblywoman Quirk-Silva, we went on a trip to Norway 2 years ago. It was my first year as a senator through Smart Justice and Amend, and it completely blew my mind. It was a complete 180 change of perspective on these issues. And I was told that I was I shouldn't have started with prisons outside of California. The first prison I visited was in Norway. And it set a bar really, really high of like, oh, this is fantastic. This is what incarcerated individuals in California, this is like their life. It wasn't. Nowhere near the services and the surroundings of what people in Norway got to see. Fast forward, the Women's Caucus took us to Chowchilla, and that bar was completely dropped. And I was able to speak to grandmothers, people that look like my grandma, spent their whole life incarcerated with no end in sight. And it really changed my perspective to say, when I talk about feminism, am I including the women in prisons? And originally I wasn't. And I had to check myself. And I had to say, I need to do more. And now I'm so humbled and proud to be standing amongst women who have been working in this space. And last year with SB 1069, I was able to push the needle forward to give an outside entity investigatory jurisdiction into claims. Because what's happening right now is a friend who works in the CDCR can commit something, their friend in CDCR will investigate, and that's a biased approach to it. So my bill, SB 337, wants to go further. You heard from Amika some of the things I'm looking to do, and as it reads right now, it's just the things that she mentioned, but we're going to add a lot of provisions, and I'd like to share some of those with you. We want to make sure that the incarcerated individual gets a third-party advocate with them when they're being searched. Because if you haven't heard, if you didn't hear the recent story, a gynecologist was able to assault and rape women during medical procedures, but there was another person there. But it was another CDCR individual. We need a third-party advocate for any kind of searches and scans of individuals. We are asking that CDCR document every single time they search someone, because right now they are not. And any officer can come up to an incarcerated woman and say, "Strip, I want to search," and there's no documentation that that ever happened. I want to expand the window of the ability to report. We know that these incidents are traumatic. You need some time to sit with it, to process it. The short time that is allotted right now for incarcerated women or any unincarcerated individual to report a rape or an assault, it's too short of a time, and we need to expand that to give them time for when they're ready to report. We want to, like I've mentioned before with my SB 1069 with Office of Inspector General, I'm going further in this bill to ensure that they have more jurisdiction. We had to do some concessions last year, and I want to come back and push the envelope further to make sure that they're not just overseeing them, but they're an entity that someone can report to. Instead of just reporting to CDCR individuals, a survivor of assault or rape can now will be able to report to OIG. And I want to hold higher standards for those entrusted with the protection of incarcerated population by ensuring that when they are found guilty, like a CDCR individual, are found guilty of violent sexual crimes, they can't be simply hired somewhere else. The transferring of individuals from one prison to another is not the solution. They're just going to continue a trail of trauma from one place to the other. And another thing, if someone is investigating a report and it's against their roommate, it's against their sibling, then that, again, creates a biased approach. So we want to make sure that CDCR individuals who are investigating a crime or a claim have to recuse themselves if they have a personal connection to the individual who is being named in this report. If we expect people to be able to truly be rehabilitated within CDCR, we have to stop the cycle of abuse and harm that for so many was the core reason, as you heard, that got them there in the first place. So this comprehensive bill, along with the rest of the people that were presented today, make a clear commitment, not just from the Women's Caucus, but across the legislature, that we want to protect a population that is often forgotten. Thank you, and I'd like to now turn over to my colleague, Assemblymember. Ortega then. Okay. There's a list here.
Did I spend my...
Okay.
Buenos dias. Good morning. I'm Assemblymember Liz Ortega, representing District 20. Again, I'd like to thank all my colleagues, but most importantly, those who have provided their testimony today and shared the stories. It really puts a face behind all the statistics that we keep hearing about. I will briefly talk about AB 800. This is my bill that deals with the affordability crisis that we're facing as a state and also deals with price gouging in our own state systems. Too often we hear about the cost that families are being impacted by when it comes to purchasing items such as groceries, gas, food, going to pay their rent. But unfortunately, this is happening within our own state system. We are price gouging our families who are going to visit their loved ones who are in the CDCR facilities. Through this process, I've heard stories of oftentimes of women, mothers traveling, having to spend money on gas, hotels, flights, just to go visit their loved ones and be able to take a picture with them and their babies. But unfortunately, when they're arriving at these facilities, they're being price gouged. I am learning about facilities that are charging up to $15 for a tiny frozen hamburger that's being sold in a vending machine. This is not okay. The vast majorities of families with incarcerated family members are already unable to afford basic needs. These high prices create yet another barrier to visiting family members and rehabilitative mechanisms recognizing for reducing recidivism. AB 800 aims to rectify this. It requires that food prices and vending machines align with the average market retail price in the communities where the prisons are located. AB 800 will ensure that reasonable and affordable prices, creating a normalized and dignified environment for the innocent families of the incarcerated. During a recent hearing, I heard from the vending machine operators who talked about needing to make a profit so that their children could go to college, so they could afford nice things. What about our children? What about our families who go to visit their loved ones in these systems? Do they not have a right to go to college? Do they not have a right to be able to afford basic things? That is why I'm introduce AB 800. We need to stop the price gouging of these vending machines in these facilities and ensure that we address the affordability crisis that is impacting these women and their children. Thank you so much for having me here today. Senator Smallwood Cuevas, please.
Good morning, and it's my absolute honor to be here with my good colleagues on this very important issue. Like my good senator and assembly members, I had the opportunity to travel to Norway, and I will never forget the slogan, the theme, the marker that's on the prisons as you enter, and every prison guard you meet, every staff member you meet reminds the visitor that prisons are not for punishment, that prisons are to create good neighbors. That is the Norway model. When we come to California, we know we just recently added R for rehabilitation to the definition and name of what we do with our incarcerated individuals. And it's a damn shame that as we stand as a shiny state on a hill in this national condition and implications this year, that we're hearing these horrible stories of how women are being physically violated, mentally broken, and returning home with nothing to raise families in our communities. And we know that women build families and families build community. And we're here today that we need to center our women in this conversation as we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on rehabilitation program for incarcerated men. We think we need to create parity for women and address the disparities that exist for our women who are behind bars. I was first introduced to women leaders like the ones you heard from today by Susan Burton in my community, A New Way of Life, that over 20 years ago decided that our communities need to be the place where we repair the harm committed on women who we have incarcerated behind bars. And so I am here today to support this very mighty work group of fierce leaders and community advocates as we say it's time for a change. And as chair of the Senate Labor Committee, as a woman who has worked in our most vulnerable communities creating workforce opportunities, I want to tell you that formerly incarcerated women have a 70% chance of reaching the highest unemployment levels that exist in our communities because they do not have access to 70% of the jobs. And so we've got to make sure that we change that, and that is why I am authoring SB 75 to ensure that we create a targeted and intentional effort to support women who are coming out of prison, but also while they're in prison, to address the barriers of employment by having relevant and important training models that ensure that they can earn and learn once they come out of prison and be centered in an industry network that will guarantee them future careers. SB 75 establishes a pilot reentry program that provides stipends and resources for women to access training and employment opportunities, especially in high-road, union-supported jobs. And we know, I know, that a woman's role is in her union, and we think that this is the opportunity for our trades union, our trades women, to wrap their arms around these women, our neighbors, to ensure that they have an employment opportunity that will sustain them and their families for generations to come. We know that disproportionately Black and Latino women are impacted by incarceration in California. Though Black women are representing less than 5% of the population, they are 23% of incarcerated female population, and despite making up a smaller share of those in the workforce, Latino women account for 37% of the incarcerated population. And if we just look at the unemployment rate for formerly incarcerated Black women, as I mentioned, it is 3 times their incarcerated population. And so we have a lot of work to do to ensure that we see our mothers returning to lead the families that our communities must support and deserve. And we know that research shows that stable employment eliminates recidivism. SB 75, we know we have an opportunity to build a real reentry program for women rooted in real careers that create real outcomes for equity, not just for those women's lives, but also for our industries, by ensuring that women are well represented. This is our future workforce, and they deserve the same attention and investment as all others. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to working with you on getting this important policy and the others we've heard today over the finish line. And next, I will invite, it looks like Assemblymember Rodriguez. Assembly member, the most awaited, Assembly member Al-Hawari.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Assemblymember Sade El-Hawari, proudly representing the 57th District, which is mostly South Central Los Angeles. And I often tell folks that, you know, this is my first time in this world, in the legislative process, serving in this, in this really powerful role. But in reality, this is my first time, and I recognize that because I'm surrounded by badass women who are fighters, who are fighting alongside not just me, but fighting alongside incarcerated women and formerly incarcerated women and advocates who are doing the work, we are better off for the women here in California who deserve better, and those especially who are behind bars. I'm here today because when we talk about justice reform, we have to talk about the specific overlooked impact our system has on women and what we're doing to change that. We're here because how we treat incarcerated women and what happens when they come home matters. For too long, our justice system has failed women. It hasn't addressed their trauma, mental health, or the barriers they face when trying to rebuild their lives. That's why I introduced Assembly Bill 1231, which gives judges the discretion to connect individuals, especially women, to treatment and services instead of sending them to prison. And that's before they even hit the carceral system. But as we also talked about today, rehabilitation is so important. And we introduced AB 952 because there's opportunities such as the fire camps in Pine Grove and Growlersburg who are really investing in the opportunities to ensure that young folks, the young offender program, have wraparound services to be rehabilitated while they're also supporting with fighting wildfires throughout our state. And we want to make sure that those are also expanded and investing in women as well. But policy alone isn't enough. I'm also fighting in this year's budget to expand investments in reentry housing, education, and rehabilitation programs. Because a sentence shouldn't be a life sentence to poverty and instability. The numbers don't lie. Next year, California's prison population is expected to grow by over 3,000 people. If we don't act now, we'll continue repeating the same cycle. We already know what works. Programs like A New Way of Life, and CROP, and the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and Amity Foundation. They prove that investing in people reduces recidivism and strengthens public safety. The governor's budget makes some important investments, but it's not enough. We need to do more to fund community-based solutions that break the cycle of incarceration. This is about public safety, but it's also about dignity. We have a choice. Keep investing in prisons or invest in the supports that help women heal and thrive. Thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it back to our fearless Assemblywoman, Sharon Quirk-Silva. Just kidding. Just all of the fearless women.
It's early. Thank you so much. I just wanted to take a brief opportunity to talk about my piece of legislation, which is AB 938, recently passed the Assembly Public Safety Committee and is currently in Assembly Appropriations. AB 938, the Survivors Act of 2025, we know that gender-based violence is a nationwide crisis, with nearly 50% of women experiencing physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking in their lifetime. And in fact, California is a human trafficking hotspot, a sobering reality coupled with the fact that over 90% of human trafficking victims are criminalized during their trafficking. 75% of women who are incarcerated report that within the last year, prior to their incarceration or arrest, they were victimized or sexually violated. That means that we are sending victims to prison. This bill, AB 938, seeks to ensure that we're tackling the challenge of providing other avenues for people to have judicial review during their sentencing cycle. This kind of legislation has been championed across party lines nationwide, giving survivors a chance to prove an offense was a direct result of their experience as a victim. I'm proud to center the lived experience of survivors with this overdue piece of legislation. It's my great honor to champion this on such an important issue. And I also just want to recognize and take a moment to recognize April here from Sister Warriors as well, who has had an opportunity to sponsor this piece of legislation as well as CAST. So with that, I will, I'm not going to put you on the spot. Okay. I'll hand it over to Assemblywoman Quirk-Silva.
Right. You've heard a lot of facts and figures, testimonies, narratives, and I just want to wind up. I do also have my first time bills working in this space, and again, born out of the idea that we can do better. Some of the top level takeaways from not only traveling out of the United States, but here visiting prisons, is some of the information that kind of sticks with me is that women often are visited on a much less percentage than males who are incarcerated, many times not seeing their children or family for years, knowing that the resources that are going into our prisons, there is not parity. We see much more programming in prisons where males are. We see much more investment, a huge investment coming this year for San Quentin. Not that we don't support those investments, but we want to see parity. My three bills that I'm presenting very quickly, AB 923 establishes a California Women's Care Act to help pregnant and postpartum defendants navigate the criminal justice system and access safer, more compassionate alternatives to incarceration in county jails. Now, why is in county jails important? We know that individuals being housed in county jails, it used to be a short time, and now they can be there for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So understanding, are there different pathways who women that are pregnant, and could we look at reimagining how those women are incarcerated? Not saying that they won't actually go to jail to serve their time, but do they need to do it while they're pregnant? That's one bill. AB 788 strengthens the rehabilitative efforts for incarcerated women by requiring CDCR to implement key reforms, including reporting on female offender reform master plan, restoring collaborative review processes, and providing annual staff training and submitting reports to the legislature every 3 years. And by the way, there's actually already been some of this work done. Our issue is that it's not enforced. Our issue is that it has not been taken seriously. Finally, I have AB 1195, which again strengthens visitation rights for incarcerated parents by establishing clear enforcement mechanisms for county jails. And again, I'm talking about the jails again, because we know that when, whether it's male or female, when they see their children, this can be transformative not only for the parents, but especially for the children. And these are bills that move the needle, that I believe are essential, but I want to commend and thank all of our presenters here and for all of the work that some have been doing for decades. I want to thank the survivors for sharing their stories. We know that it is traumatic to retell and restate what has happened, but we also know the more that we share, the more that we talk, that we can create change, and we need that change. Thank you to everybody here, and thank you to my partner on this working group, Assemblymember Mia Bonta, and we are counting on change, and we will continue that work.